Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made towards reaching a resolution to the ongoing dispute with the Fire Brigades Union.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let me be clear that the Scottish Government is not in dispute with the FBU. The FBU campaigns on behalf of its members, as all trade unions do, and we share the aim of having an effective and fire and rescue service to keep our communities safe. I meet regularly with the FBU and I'm next scheduled to meet with them this month.
Pauline McNeill.
Regional Secretary of the Fire Brigade Union, John Mackenzie, is on record as saying the union are in consultation with their members around industrial action, but it's extremely important to note that this action is as a result of the deep impact of cuts on the safe running of the fire and rescue service, and firefighters are considering taking this unprecedented action because they are firmly of the view that lives are being put at risk. With that in mind, what is the Scottish Government going to do to avert strike action and ensure safer communities?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The £36 million savings figure for 26-27 quoted by the SFRS Chief Officer is based on various assumptions of inflation, pay increases and future funding levels, which can all change over time. The RSR provides long-term indicative spending plans for the Scottish Government based on the challenging financial situation we currently find ourselves in. While it is appropriate for the SFRS to assess its long-term planning up to 26-27 on that basis, it does not replace the annual budget presented to Parliament. The actual amount allocated to SFRS in the annual budget will be based on a robust assessment of need, as was the case for 23-24 when we gave them an extra £14.4 million.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our fire service is in crisis, according to the Fire Brigades Union. This ongoing dispute, if unresolved, threatens to have a further detrimental impact on response times in rural communities in my area. Minister, why is it that rural communities should suffer due to the SNP Government's failure to resolve long-standing issues within Scotland's fire and rescue service?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Since 2017 to 18, there has been a substantial year-on-year increases in funding to support SFRS to create a modern and effective fire and rescue service. The equivalent annual budget for SFRS for 23 to 24 is over £55.3 million higher than it was in 2017 to 2018. And I'd just like to highlight to the member, during the First Minister's questions on the 26th of October, the First Minister made clear and I quote, "We continue to invest in our fire service. I want to thank and pay tribute to the FBU and our firefighters on the ground. I will continue to promise them that we will, as long as we are in government, continue to ensure that they will get the investment that they need to keep the community safe."
Question number 2, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the Fire Brigades Union report, Firestorm, which reportedly warns that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is in crisis.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you. I recognise the role that the Fire Brigade Union plays in highlighting the concerns of its members, including in the publication of their Firestorm report. There are many points in the Firestorm report that I agree with, including that our firefighters should be paid a fair wage for their work that they do and should be properly trained and equipped to deal with the wide range of emergency incidents that they attend. And as I said in my previous answer, we're providing Scottish Fire Rescue with more than £368 million this year, which is an increase of £14.4 million on last year. And this Scottish Government will continue to support SFRS to prioritise public safety.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Minister for that answer. On Tuesday, the Fire Brigade indicated in their publication showed new statistics showing a rise in fatal fire incidents and an increase in non-fatal fire casualties, amounting to just under 1,000 in 1 year. The data illustrates the dangerous consequences of an underfunded fire brigade. Therefore, can the Minister tell me how worse will it need to get before this government looks at statistics and provides the information that is required to support the fire service that they deserve?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Fatal fire casualties per million per population have been in a long-term downward trend in each nation since the early 2000s. This trend levelled off in each nation around early 2010, but differing demographics, deprivation and urban rural profiles of each nation are the likely factors in explaining the different rates of fires. But we, as the Scottish Government, will continue to work with the FBU and SFRS to ensure that they have the money that they need to keep the community safe.
Colin Beattie.
The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is highly valued for its unwavering dedication to saving lives and protecting communities, embodying the highest levels of service and public safety. Within the Firestorm report, 96% of respondents agreed that increased investment in training and facilities would positively impact the skills and preparedness of firefighters. With consideration to the concerns raised about training, will the Minister consider the recommendation in the report for an independent audit of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service training provisions?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ensuring our firefighters are properly trained and equipped is a ministerial priority within the Scottish Fire Rescue Framework 2022. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service has a dedicated Assistant Chief Officer with responsibility for training to ensure this strategic priority is properly addressed. Some aspects of training fell behind as a result of the COVID restrictions, but the service is addressing that backlog as a priority. His Majesty's Fire Service Inspectorate in Scotland carries out independent inspection of fire service activity, and training is already examined as part of the HMFSI Service Delivery Area Inspection Programme. The East Service Delivery Area Inspection Report was published on the 19th of October, and the service will be taking forward all the recommendations contained in the report.
Katie Clark.
Minister agree with me that the Firestorm report makes alarming reading, and that the failure to provide safe systems to enable firefighters to decontaminate is a failure of the employers to provide a duty of care to their workforce?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The safety and well-being of firefighters is a priority for both the Scottish Government and the Fire Service. SFRS continue to make progress with its contamination working group, and I was pleased that we were able to recently provide £56,000 contribution to allow Scottish firefighters to be part of the current health screening trials.
Question number 3, Russell Findlay.
Thank you. I ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the transition of HMP Kilmarnock into public ownership.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, I saw first-hand when I visited HMP Kilmarnock in August, work on its transition into public ownership and operation is progressing well and on track for handover to the Scottish Prison Service on the 17th of March next year. The Scottish Prison Service has been working closely with Kilmarnock Prison Services Limited and Serco, the private operator, to deliver a smooth transition in a way that not only supports staff and those in custody, but maintains the high standards already set within the prison.
Russell Findlay.
Thank you. I also visited the prison last week and asked the staff if they backed the transfer. None did. I asked if they knew why it was happening. None of them did. I asked if they knew how it would happen. None of them did. Humza Yousaf is transferring HMP Kilmarnock for blindly ideological reasons. He doesn't actually care that it's an effective, efficient and well-run prison. The SNP transfer will even result in staff losing the protection of body-worn cameras which will be sent to English prisons. Will the Cabinet Secretary reverse this dangerous decision and commit to providing cameras to all prison officers across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the contract with Serco was due to come to an end, and this government has always believed that our prisons should be owned and operated within the public sector, and that, Presiding Officer, is in the interest of public safety and not private profit. And when you look at the facts of the matter in terms of information, there is a lower level of assaults within the Scottish Prison Service in comparison to our private prisons, and there is a lower level per population of drug take incidents within the public sector as well. Matters that I thought that Mr Findlay would take seriously. I can also give him reassurance on the body-worn cameras that the Scottish Prison Service is finalising its arrangements for a pilot in collaboration with our trade union partners, and that the cameras currently within HMP Kilmarnock belong to Serco and not the Scottish Prison Service. So let me assure him that efforts are being made and will be made to take forward the important factor around body-worn cameras.
Willie Coffey.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Mr Findlay's comments are completely at odds with what I hear from the Project Director and the staff at Kilmarnock Prison over many years. Can the Minister confirm that arrangements for troopy transfer for all the staff and prison officers is well underway and that there will be an overall beneficial impact when they transfer to the SPS?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the transfer will take place following the well-established two-pay process, the regulations that have existed since 2006. The Scottish Prison Service has written to Serco to inform staff groups on the measures that will be taken. There are plans developed in partnership with recognised trade unions, and the Scottish Prison Service is actively planning one-to-one meetings, and it's also important to recognise that the Chief Executive of the Scottish Prison Service has chaired 4 engagement sessions to date.
We move to question 4, and let's keep our questions and responses concise, please. And I call Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its national transitions to adulthood strategy following its statement of intent on the 28th of September.
Minister Natalie Dawn.
We will introduce Scotland's first national transitions to adulthood strategy in this parliamentary term to ensure all disabled young people can experience a supported and positive transition to adult life. We're currently engaging with more young people, parent carers and others with a role or interest in transitions to seek feedback on that statement of intent. Following this phase of engagement, we will analyse and publish a summary of the responses to show what people have said, and this will then be used to develop the strategy going forward.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the Minister for that answer, but this Government mentioned a strategy on transitions as far back as 2016 in their manifesto. That's 7 years ago and there's still no strategy. A young person who entered high school then will have left by now. They've not seen a strategy and their chances have been affected as a result. The Government know transitions isn't working. So can I ask the Minister, what date will her Government publish a national transition strategy, and will it include a legal right to a plan that gives all young disabled people a fighting chance for the future?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As I've said in my previous answer, we're currently seeking feedback on the statement of intent through the online questionnaire, through a whole host of engagement events, including the Glasgow Disability Alliance's Transitions event for young people, the Scottish Youth Parliament and the forthcoming Carers Parliament. And this is an important step to sense check what we've heard so far. We want to get this right. Findings from this phase of engagement will be used to develop the strategy going forward, which we will aim to consult on more widely in spring 2024.
Thank you. Question number 5 has been withdrawn for reasons that are apparent, and we move to question number 6, and I call Christine Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what data it has on rates of winter admissions to accident and emergency as a result of winter falls since October 2020.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Public Health Scotland published quarterly data on emergency hospital admissions resulting from a fall. When looking at the total fall admissions across the 2 winter quarters ending December and March, there has been a slight downward trend, with the highest numbers seen in the winter of 2020-2021 of being 18,508 and the lowest number in winter of 2022-23 of 17,892.
Christine Graham.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for a detailed answer. Can advise the Cabinet Secretary both Midlothian Council and Scottish Borders Council in my constituency have information on their website as to where salt bins are located, which is good. However, would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the more that can be done by simply increasing the number of salt bins for clearing winter pavements, the likelihood is even fewer falls and less pressure on already hard-pressed accident and emergency?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I would certainly want to encourage councils across the country, and I know they do, to take action when there is adverse weather that can result in slippery pavements, which can have a knock-on effect to demand on our A&E departments. I know that local authorities will consider applications from local communities who are looking for salt bins to be located within their respective areas. It's something I've undertaken on behalf of constituents within my own constituency, and I'd certainly want to encourage the member to do so on behalf of her constituents where they feel that would be appropriate.
Question number 7, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to residents who have been required to evacuate their properties due to deteriorating reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
Where residents are evacuated from their homes under local authority dangerous building powers, it is for the local authority themselves to determine what support is available to the individuals affected. For Mark Ruskell's constituents who have been decanted in Tillicoochry, this has involved providing temporary housing as well as support and advice to find alternative accommodation while detailed investigations take place. My thoughts are, of course, with the families who are currently in these circumstances, and the impact on those households has been significant, but I know that Kilmarnock Council is working hard to minimise disruption while keeping people safe.
Mark Ruskell.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response and obviously her awareness of the situation in Tillicoochry. I also understand, though, that the Council there suspected that over 100 other residences in the same area could also be seriously affected. So can I ask about what that engagement with Kilmarnock Council and the Scottish Government has looked like? Has there been correspondence about the dire situation that some residents are in at the moment? And how is the Scottish Government preventing affected residents across Scotland from remaining in temporary accommodation indefinitely while they await the outcome of building assessments and potential remedial works?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the Government is in contact with all councils on this issue and with the Scottish Housing Regulator, and they have been with the example of Tillicoochry right from when this was first identified. My understanding is that 29 households across 3 housing blocks have been affected, and the local authority is conducting further survey work to determine next steps, but has not identified other blocks with unsafe RAC. And I think this is an important point for reassurance, Presiding Officer, that the Institution of Structural Engineers note that statements of, for example, a 30-year lifespan for RAC are misleading. There is no specific data supporting this. The Institute note that, if manufactured and installed correctly and appropriately maintained, RAC should perform comparably with similar materials. But they also, of course, stress the importance of inspecting RAC installations to determine the condition, which is very much my understanding of what the Council is doing.
Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A freedom of information request I put into Edinburgh City Council identified 2 developments comprising of 43 homes which contain RAC. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell Parliament, do ministers actually now know how many social rented properties and private properties across Scotland could now be containing RAC in this country?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I highlighted in my original answer, this is an issue for the Council's concern, but we are working with the Scottish Housing Regulator to undertake a data gathering exercise in the presence of RAC across all social housing providers. The initial responses were that, for that request were due for the 31st of October and are now being collated. And it is very important to ensure that the Scottish Government continues, as it is already, to work with local councils to support communities where affected.
Question number 8, Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what action it can take in response to the reported rise of violence and bullying in schools.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
In June, I convened the first meeting of the Head Teacher Task Force focused on school exclusions. In September and October, I hosted 2 events as part of the Scottish Government Summit on Relationships and Behaviour in Schools. A third event will take place later this month to discuss the behaviour in Scottish schools research. This research will provide the robust national picture of what is happening in our schools across the country on a wide range of behaviours. And my aim from the summit process is to work with teachers and other stakeholders to identify practical actions we need to take to make progress. Finally, we have started a review of our national anti-bullying guidance, Respect for All. The outputs from the summit and behaviour research will all inform this work.
Alec Crowley.
I thank the Minister for that answer, the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I think it is important to work with teachers, to work with pupils, to work with schools, but the fact is that we're not going to build a world-class education while so many pupils are worried in schools. We need to put discipline and behaviour back on the top of the agenda as a condition for being in school. Is the Cabinet Secretary going to bring forward a detailed proposal that sets out the types of resources and the plan that we're going to do to address this problem, which is affecting schools up and down Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr Rowley for his question. I very much recognise his interest, and I agree with him that we need to work with the profession in relation to how we can support them to best respond to some of these challenges. He talked about behaviour and discipline. I'm very conscious that we have a cohort of young people moving through our education system who have experienced disruption to their education, whether that be from industrial action or from COVID impacts, and we need to be mindful that all of that is playing into changed behaviour and relationships in our schools. That being said, the member raises an important point. There is already national guidance in relation to what we provide as a Scottish Government. The national policy that already exists is the Included, Engaged and Involved policy document. However, I've made very clear that my intention through the summit process is that we look to gather the national evidence from those working on the front line. So yes, our teachers, but those of course who work as learning support assistants too, who play a hugely important role in relation to our schools. We use the findings from the summit process and the BISA research, which gives us the national picture, to help inform that national action plan. And subject to the agreement of Parliament, I would intend, Presiding Officer, to bring forward a statement later this year to that end.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In June 2021, the Scottish Government were told to retain messages relevant to their handling of the COVID pandemic. But 5 months later, the SNP introduced a policy to destroy WhatsApp messages. This is the digital equivalent of building a bonfire to torch the evidence. So, First Minister, why did the SNP bring in a policy to delete messages after they've been told to keep them?
First Minister.
First of all, of course, the policy being referred to by Douglas Ross is a general policy around messaging, mobile messaging, including informal messaging, such as WhatsApp. Of course, what is key when we got the advisory notices, both particularly from the Scottish inquiry, and then, of course, when we received information from the UK Government in relation to the UK inquiry, it was made very clear to officials, to civil servants, of course, to ministers, to cabinet secretaries, that any information that was relevant or could be potentially relevant to the inquiries should be retained and, of course, appropriately recorded within our record management system. That is why 14,000 WhatsApp messages are in the process of being handed over now that we have the Section 21 order. It's why 19,000 documents have already been submitted. It's why, when I submit my final statement, we'll have unredacted WhatsApp messages handed over to the inquiry. I should say, Presiding Officer, that is in very stark contrast to the Prime Minister, who tried to take the public inquiry to court, lost, of course, in the courts, and is still refusing to hand over his WhatsApp messages.
Douglas Ross.
People viewing this are listening to the First Minister to tell us what the Scottish Government are doing. And it is not up to Humza Yousaf or any SNP minister, current or former, to decide what is relevant to the inquiry, to pick and choose which messages are going to be handed over. Because it is absolutely clear that the SNP brought in an auto-delete policy, not just after being told not to do so by the UK COVID inquiry, but after Nicola Sturgeon had set up a separate Scottish inquiry. This policy was introduced 2 months later. Nicola Sturgeon went on television to say she couldn't withhold messages even if she wanted to. But this week it was reported that Nicola Sturgeon has deleted her WhatsApp messages. We know that destroying or withholding evidence from an inquiry is illegal. So does Humza Yousaf accept that if Nicola Sturgeon or any government minister has destroyed WhatsApp messages relevant to the inquiry, they would be breaking the law?
First Minister.
As Douglas Ross has mentioned, the former First Minister, let me just remind Douglas Ross and indeed the Chamber, in terms of accountability and transparency, Nicola Sturgeon stood up day after day, virtually every single day, did 250 media briefings, Members. 70 parliamentary statements, and full accountability, full transparency, answering questions. They don't want to hear it, Presiding Officer, because of course
First Minister, if you might take a seat
allegations.
for a moment. We're not going to continue this session in this vein. Members are required to conduct themselves in an orderly manner. Let's treat one another with courtesy and respect, and let's not decide to contribute from our seats. First Minister.
And can I remind the opposition, particularly the Conservatives, when the former First Minister stood up, did those daily media briefings, spoke to the public, took questions from the media, it was the opposition that wanted to stop that from happening in the first place. Let me be absolutely clear. Let me be absolutely clear, because this is such an important issue.
First Minister,
particularly
Mr Kerr, I must ask you to cease shouting from your seat. I'd be very grateful if you could comply. First Minister.
It is important, I think, that opposition members don't shout from a sedentary position, because there are members, families of those who have been bereaved by COVID who do want assurances. And I accept, and let me reiterate what the Deputy First Minister said a couple of days ago in this chamber. The Government does apologise to those families who are bereaved by COVID for any anxiety or distress that we have caused them. It was certainly not our intention. We received, of course, clarification from the COVID inquiry last week around their expectations. They have provided us with that Section 21 order. We are in the process of providing 14,000 WhatsApp messages, and on top of that I will give my WhatsApp messages unredacted to the COVID inquiry, because we set up that inquiry for one reason and for one reason only: to get to the truth and to ensure answers are there for those families who suffered the most during COVID.
Douglas Ross.
I cannot believe that Humza Yousaf has just stood up and in the strongest possible way defended Nicola Sturgeon, who has been accused of deleting vital WhatsApp messages. And he didn't answer the question, would she have broken the law if she has done so? But the law is very clear. Deleting evidence required by an inquiry is a criminal offence. It's in writing in the Scottish COVID inquiry's letter. The SNP government were told to make sure that no material of potential relevance to the inquiry is destroyed, deleted or disposed of. It is an offence under Section 35 of the Inquiries Act. But the problem with the SNP's policy is the messages are deleted before the inquiry can judge if they're relevant or not. Humza Yousaf has previously told this chamber, and I quote, "Any material that's asked for will absolutely be handed over to the COVID inquiries and handed over in full." So why has the SNP government now failed to deliver on that promise by deleting evidence?
First Minister.
Douglas Ross continues to say that we are not handing over WhatsApp messages. That is incorrect. We are in the process of handing over 14,000 messages. On top of those 14,000 messages, when I submit my final statement, I'll be handing over many messages, not just with Cabinet Secretary, not just with ministers, of course, with UK Government ministers, with opposition politicians that I communicated with across the chamber, and I will be doing so unredacted, because we believe, this government believes, in accountability, very different to Douglas Ross's leader of the Conservative Party, who's refusing to hand that material over. And I understand why Douglas Ross wants to talk about process as opposed to substance. The reason why, of course, is because just in this week alone, we have seen utterly scathing, damning evidence about the UK government's handling or mishandling of the COVID pandemic. So, look, I am absolutely committed, and this government is absolutely committed, to being transparent, to being accountable, because we want the truth to be heard, not just by the public, but particularly by the families who are bereaved by COVID. We certainly don't have anything to fear from the truth. I suspect the Conservatives absolutely do.
Douglas Ross.
Hamza Youssef is all over the place with this. He starts off by saying he's going to hand over all the messages. Now he's saying he's going to hand over many of them. He doesn't hide from the truth. We don't know what the truth is because messages have been deleted. And they've been deleted because of a policy of the SNP government. That policy means they can cherry-pick the information that the inquiry sees. Crucial discussions may have been destroyed by their auto-delete policy. Any uncomfortable information may be lost, never to see the light of day. This secretive approach treats the COVID inquiry and grieving families with contempt. Well, the Deputy First Minister is saying no, it doesn't. So, Shona Robeson, listen to Margaret Waterton, who lost her mother and her... Well, Jenny Gilruth, listen to someone who lost their mother and husband to the virus.
Ross, I'd be very grateful if members would give one another courtesy and respect. When a member is meant to be speaking in this chamber, let's listen to them. Mr Ross.
Senior government ministers within the SNP don't want to hear what grieving families think about their actions. So Margaret Waterton, who lost her mother and husband to the virus, said the news that the Scottish Government has withheld evidence from the COVID inquiry is, and I quote, frankly shameful. And Jane Morrison, a member of Scottish COVID Bereaved, said, if someone deliberately deleted stuff to avoid us getting to the truth, then morally and ethically, as well as legally, it's totally in the wrong. So does the First Minister regret letting down these families and so many others?
First Minister.
I think it's really important because Douglas Ross has every right to ask the questions he is asking. We have a responsibility, I think, in this chamber to remember that there's many people who lost loved ones to COVID, including many people in this chamber, including members of my own government. And what I would say is reiterate the apology made by the Deputy First Minister to Scottish Scottish COVID bereaved, and indeed to their representatives, that we did not mean to cause them the anxiety that they clearly felt as a result of what was said at the COVID inquiry last week. That is on us, and we intend to make right with that, and that is why we will release those 14,000 messages, and I will release my own messages as well. So the absolute purpose of the inquiry is to get to the truth of the handling and where there were mistakes made, to learn from those mistakes. And ultimately, everybody will have an interest in that. Businesses across the country will have an interest in that, members of the public, but most particularly, most acutely, will be those families who have been bereaved by COVID. So I can give them an absolute assurance that we are here to cooperate fully with the inquiries. And let me just remind Douglas Ross what we already know about his party's mishandling of COVID. Those families who could not say goodbye to their loved ones, those families who had to attend funerals by themselves, without their family, without friends around them, they were doing that all the while the Conservatives were partying, breaking COVID rules in Number 10.
Briefly, First
Because
Minister.
we know the Conservatives, they don't believe that the rules, frankly, apply to them, and we have seen that in the evidence this week. So I can give an absolute commitment, Presiding Officer, that the Scottish Government will fully cooperate with both inquiries.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic in Scotland, thousands of people died. It's for those people that we should be thinking about our answers and our questions today. This government sent untested and COVID-positive patients into care homes with devastating consequences, and millions suffered from the effects of lockdown. That is why both the UK and Scottish COVID inquiries are crucial, because we need to understand what happened to learn lessons for the future. Now, the Deputy First Minister and First Minister have talked a lot about individual responsibility in relation to the inquiry, but the First Minister is responsible for the conduct of the Scottish Government. So will he take personal responsibility for ensuring the Government complies in full with all requests from the COVID inquiry?
First Minister.
It is, of course, my responsibility, and of course I will liaise closely, as Anna Sauer would imagine I would, with the Permanent Secretary to ensure that the organisation fully complies. I said that to Anna Sauer previously. We, of course, will hand over whatever material that has been retained from the Scottish Government. That is why 14,000 messages are in the process, WhatsApp messages are in the process of being handed over. I should say that is on top of the 19,000 documents that we've already submitted. So it is appropriate that, of course, every single member of the Government, every single official in the Government complies. I should say to Anna Sauer on the specific point he asks, I am, of course, responsible for my witness statement. I don't know, of course, what other requests have gone to individual ministers, to individual cabinet secretaries, nor do I know what they have submitted. And that is appropriate. And Anna Sauer is mouthing why. The reason why, of course, is there's confidentiality in a public inquiry, which must, of course, be adhered to. If I tried to break that, Anna Sauer would be the first one to drag me over the hot coals and say, why on earth are you breaching confidentiality of an inquiry that could potentially prejudice any said inquiry? And just to make it absolutely clear, my understanding is that that information about the confidentiality of the inquiry has been put into Spice, but we can make sure that Anna Sauer gets a copy for his information.
Anna Sauer.
Presiding Officer, I think Humza Yousaf is missing the central point. He is the First Minister. He's responsible for the actions of the Scottish Government, ministers and officials, not just his own responsibility as an individual. And I don't think he's read the transcript from the COVID inquiry last week, which is absolutely damning about the actions of this Government and his own behaviour. In June, I asked the First Minister directly, and I quote, will he confirm that all ministers and officials, past and present, have complied with the Do Not Destroy instruction, and will he give a guarantee that all requests, emails, text and WhatsApp messages will be handed over in full to the inquiry? He gave a direct answer. He said, and I quote, yes, they will. No equivocation, no caveats, no grey areas. But we now know the messages have been deleted. And crucially, it's for the judge to decide what is relevant, not for individual ministers and officials to decide what is relevant. And again, this is about the conduct of the Scottish Government. So can the First Minister tell us, of the 70 ministers and officials, how many have failed to comply with the Do Not Destroy notice and how many have deleted messages?
First Minister.
Can we just be absolutely clear about this? Anna Sauer...
Members.
Anna Sauer is asking me to demand from individual witnesses their witness statement so that I can see what they have handed over or what they have not handed over. Because that is the only way I could know if former ministers have submitted information or not submitted
Members,
information.
let's hear
and
the
what
First
that information
Minister.
is. That would be, in my view, a pretty serious breach in terms of the confidentiality of the inquiry. In terms of the organisation, which is what Anna Sauer has also asked me about, yes, it is absolutely my expectation, the expectation of the Permanent Secretary, that potentially relevant information is kept, recorded in the appropriate way and handed over to the inquiry when that is requested. That is why, of course, we are in the process of handing over 14,000 messages. And Anna Sauer is absolutely right. 14,000 of those messages, many of them I suspect, I don't know because I haven't seen the detail, but I suspect, given that they were on WhatsApp groups, as we understand, as the Deputy First Minister outlined earlier this week, many of them may not be relevant. Anna Sauer is right. That is for the inquiry to determine. Hence why I, as First Minister, will hand over all of my WhatsApp messages in an unredacted form. Because I go back to the point that I made to Douglas Ross. The reason for this inquiry, the Scottish inquiry being set up, was to get to the truth of matters. And that's why, in the terms of reference, the issue around the discharge of patients is clearly one of the issues that the inquiry will examine and one that we will fully cooperate with.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the public can see, and indeed the inquiry can see, that the First Minister was unequivocal in June, and now they can see how he's dodging responsibility in his answers to give today. And it's also clear that the Section 21 notice was issued to the government, not to individuals and ministers and officials, and it's the government that's responsible for collating and providing that evidence to the inquiry. So to abdicate responsibility, I think, is frankly shameful, and people will see that right across the country. But the harsh reality is this, Presiding Officer: the First Minister has lost control of his government. He doesn't know how many ministers or officials have complied with the Do Not Destroy notice. He doesn't know how many have deleted messages, and he claims that the government's response to the inquiry is for individuals rather than for his government. The First Minister promised this chamber he would ensure all material was handed to the inquiry in full. And this week we've seen how important these messages are. So can I ask the First Minister, why does he believe his government should be held to a lower standard than the Tories at Westminster? What is he doing to identify those who do not comply with the Do Not Destroy notices? And what action is he taking against those who failed to comply? Or should we conclude that his word means nothing?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, let me try to clarify again some of the issues that Anna Sarwar has raised. It's important to say, and this is crucial, that when it came to the request from the UK Government inquiry, in June, the inquiry asked us for details of the various groups, the WhatsApp groups concerning COVID-19. They did not request the messages themselves. The messages themselves were asked for in September, just a matter of weeks ago. We then, of course, the Government, asked for a Section 21 order because of the personal information in some of those messages. And that was received. And now, of course, we will meet the deadline for the 6th of November to hand over 14,000 messages in unredacted form. And I can hear Jackie Bailey shouting, destroyed. The 14,000 messages have not been destroyed. We're handing them over. And they include ministers, past and present. We don't know the ministers because, again, for confidentiality purposes. But we know that they do include ministers, past and present. I go back to the point here that Anna Sarwar, Douglas Ross have every right to ask about messages being handed over. So I can give an unequivocal guarantee to those families who have been bereaved by COVID that the messages that we have retained will absolutely be handed over and handed over in full. And that as First Minister, as the head of this government, I will, when submitting my statement, be handing over my messages in full and unredacted, Presiding Officer.
Question number 3, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on waiting times for post-cancer breast reconstruction surgery.
First Minister.
We recognise the importance of breast reconstruction surgery. I'm aware that there are still unacceptable waits in some specialities, but we are, of course, committed to delivering sustained improvements and year-on-year reductions through service redesign and also through national working. Waiting times are not published by individual procedure. However, the most recent national statistics from June show that there was almost 7,500 patients waiting for inpatient day case treatment in the plastic surgery speciality in Scotland. Breast reconstruction surgery covers a range of procedures and delays can be caused by a number of factors. And we know, of course, the impact that the pandemic has had. But I can assure Pam Gossel we are working hard to ensure that we reduce those waiting times.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Breast cancer treatment is not just physically demanding, it is emotionally taxing too. Reconstructive surgery gives women the chance to regain control of their bodies. A Freedom of Information response I've received shows the average wait time for this surgery is nearly 400 days in Greater Glasgow and Clyde. But for my constituent, it has been more than 3.5 years since her mastectomy. She was told she would have a date for her surgery by 21st of October. The date has come and gone. Does the First Minister accept that this is not good? What steps will he take to cut waiting times for this surgery and ensure that patients such as my constituent are not left waiting for years?
First Minister.
Can I thank Pam Gossel for raising the case of her constituent. I obviously don't know the details, but Pam Gossel can write to me if she hasn't done so already. I'd be happy to look at the case. The Health Secretary would be happy to raise it with the Health Board, because I do agree with Pam Gossel's premise that waits of that length are unacceptable. Pam Gossel speaks powerfully around the emotional and physical impact of breast cancer in particular. We have been, of course, working towards improvements in waiting times. We have met the 31-day standard as by the most recent statistics, but I'm afraid fallen short where we need to be in terms of the 62-day standard. So we'll continue to progress work and action to reduce those waiting lists. I will ensure that Cabinet Secretary for Health writes in detail to Pam Gossel about some of the actions we are taking. But in the meantime, if Pam Gossel does provide me the details of her constituent, we will of course liaise with the Health Board to see if there's anything further that can be done.
Question number 4, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking to increase public awareness of fireworks safety ahead of Bonfire Night.
First Minister.
We have recently launched our annual public awareness campaigns across a range of media platforms. These campaigns reinforce the appropriate messaging around attending organised displays and how to stay safe over the bonfire weekend. I encourage everyone to familiarise themselves with those campaigns and with the firework code. Additionally, we've distributed over 200,000 safety leaflets to retailers and the Scottish Wholesale Association, trading standard teams and third sector partners to increase awareness of fireworks safety and the law at the point of sale. It is, of course, illegal to buy or give fireworks to anyone under the age of 18, to use fireworks before 6 p.m. or after 11 p.m. That's extended to midnight on the 5th, and it's also legal to use fireworks in the street or other public places. Ultimately, this is so the public and, crucially, our emergency services can have a safe bonfire night.
Claire Adamson.
Thank the First Minister for his answer. Recent data from Scottish Fire and Rescue shows that the number of deliberate fires in the 3 weeks up to November 5th has fallen by 30% since 2018 to 907 last year. This is very welcome news, but every year our emergency workers are subjected to immense pressure through to the misuse of fireworks, compounded with antisocial behaviour. Would the First Minister agree that the public can do a real service to our emergency services by taking the decision to attend a public display, which is by far and away the safest and most enjoyable way for a family to spend on the evening of Bonfire Night?
First Minister.
I do agree with that from Claire Adamson. Fireworks can be a great spectacle and enable communities to come together. As injuries are less likely to occur at a public display, we would always encourage people to attend one. I know many communities, regional, national organisations, as well as local authorities, do fantastic work to organise such displays. As members know, we have strengthened the law around access to the use of fireworks with the aim to reduce demand on our emergency services. The new law also makes attacks against emergency workers an aggravated offence that can be considered by courts when sentencing offenders. So I would do as Claire Adamson has articulated very well, encourage people to attend those public displays where they are available.
Russell Findlay.
Thank you. SNP ministers claim their new firework control zones will improve public safety around Bonfire Night, but my party has found that at least 28 of Scotland's 32 councils have no plans to introduce them. This includes Dundee, where riot police are on the streets to tackle gangs using fireworks to inflict chaos and terror. So can Humza Yousaf explain why his rushed firework law is being ignored by councils suffering from severe SNP cuts?
First Minister.
It is, of course, for local authorities to make an application for a control zone. I'm assuming that Conservative-led councils have also don't have control zones in place. So I don't think we should be blaming local authorities, nor indeed the government, for the actions that we saw in Dundee. We should be very, very clear that those who misuse fireworks, particularly endangering the public, particularly endangering our emergency services, they should be the ones that should be held to account for their reckless actions. We should be getting behind our fire service, getting behind Police Scotland, to do a fantastic job, and our ambulance service to do a fantastic job in the run-up to Bonfire Night and Bonfire Night itself. But we have brought forward legislation. There are a number of applications in for a control zone, and of course they will be given due consideration.
Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I declare an interest as convener of the cross-party group on animal welfare. First Minister, the safety of people, especially children, is obviously paramount. But does the First Minister agree with me that we should be mindful of the effect of fireworks on our pets and indeed livestock to keep them safe too? And if in doubt, what to do to follow the advice of animal organisations, including the NFUS?
First Minister.
Yes, I do agree with that. There's some excellent guidance from a number of third sector partners. NFUS is one of them. I know from the SSPCA and others there's some very good guidance up, because Christine Graham is right. We often focus on members of the public. That should absolutely include our pets as well, who we know can suffer during the lead up to Bonfire Night and Bonfire Night itself. But I would do, as Christine Graham has suggested, for those who are unsure about animal welfare and safety during this period, please do look at a range of third sector organisations who can provide that excellent advice.
Question number 5, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to ensure that dentists are suitably funded to be able to continue taking on NHS patients, in light of reports that some dentists in Edinburgh are ceasing to accept NHS patients altogether.
First Minister.
This is a serious problem that has been exacerbated, of course, by the global pandemic, and there has been, I'm pleased to say, an improving picture in NHS dentistry since the pandemic. Building on that progress is an absolute priority for the Government. We've been working closely with the British Dental Association Scotland and the wider sector on payment reform, which actually launched just yesterday. This is the most significant change to NHS dentistry in a generation. It provides practitioners with a whole new suite of fees that are designed to provide a full range of care and treatment to NHS patients. I'm very confident that reform will provide longer-term sustainability to the dental sector and encourage dentists to continue to provide NHS care, helping to further mitigate some of the access challenges that we are seeing.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank the First Minister for the answer. My constituent, Claire, was informed that her dentist would be privatised from January, and they would need to start paying monthly fees or leave. This is not an isolated issue. Another family in the west of Edinburgh were also informed their dentist would be privatised. Both families were not able to find another dentist taking on NHS patients in their areas. Can I ask the First Minister to outline what action the Scottish Government have taken to support dentists and their staff to ensure they remain accessible for all?
First Minister.
As I've said, this is an extremely important issue that Faisal Chowdhury has raised, and I hope that when we can provide him with the details of the payment reform, he will see that we are doing our very best working with the sector to incentivise NHS dentistry. Just by way of example, a dentist providing a full set of dentures will now receive £366.80. That's an increase of over 60%. In terms of a surface filling, we've increased the fee by almost 45%. So we're trying to incentivise that NHS dentistry because of the issues that Faisal Chowdhury is absolutely right to mention. I would also say that we are working with the BDA and others in relation to the recruitment and retention of dentists, particularly in areas where we know the problem is most acute. So I will ensure that the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care does write to Faisal Chowdhury with a full detailed response of all the actions that we are taking in this regard.
Question number 6, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government is making public transport more affordable.
First Minister.
We are taking a range of actions to deliver an affordable public transport system for people right throughout Scotland. Earlier this week, we announced that £2 million will be made available in next year's budget to progress-free travel for people seeking asylum here in Scotland. We also this week announced the expansion of the existing National Ferry Concessionary Travel Scheme to all island residents under the age of 22. Right now, passengers throughout Scotland are also benefiting from low fares as a result of our decision to pilot the removal of peak fares on ScotRail. And with thanks to the most comprehensive concessionary travel scheme in the UK, over 2 million people are eligible to benefit from free bus travel, with over 3 million journeys taking place every single week.
Mark Ruskell.
Can I thank the First Minister for outlining those successes? Free bus travel has been described as life-saving for people seeking asylum. And when those people, having escaped from persecution, war and suffering, are now forced to live on just £6 a day, the very least that we can do is to extend a hand of help. Does the First Minister agree with me that it is our responsibility to use the full extent of our powers to welcome those forced to flee their homes? And does he agree that by extending free bus travel to people seeking asylum, we're showing that we are a country and a parliament that is proud to protect all those who seek safety here?
First Minister.
I think that is absolutely well said by Mark Russell, and I agree with every single word of it. We have long campaigned together, and we have done so often with other political parties, the Greens included, against the UK government's inhumane asylum processes that have left asylum seekers, many asylum seekers who are not able to work, of course, almost to the point of destitution. In fact, many of them in destitution. So Mark Ruskell is right to challenge the Scottish Government to see what more we can do to try to help and try to assist. And that's why I'm pleased we've announced £2 million will be made available in next year's budget to progress free bus travel for people seeking asylum. It's an issue that our Green colleagues have been keen to pursue with urgency and indeed with pace. So this announcement is the next step in making sure that our transport system, our country, is fair and accessible to all. And I could not agree more with Mark Ruskell that where people are seeking safety, sanctuary from war, from persecution, from poverty, extreme poverty, from hatred, then we have a responsibility, all of us, to step up to ensure that we help them as best we possibly can.
Graham Simpson.
Thank you. I'm sure the First Minister would agree with me that the UK Government's £2 bus fare cap scheme is a very positive initiative. It's made a real difference for thousands of people and encourages more people to use the buses. So when can we expect to see something similar here in Scotland?
First Minister.
We have, yes, that lacklustre response from his own colleagues is probably quite merited, because we have, of course, the most comprehensive, very comprehensive concessionary bus travel scheme, the most comprehensive concessionary travel scheme in the UK. And of course, we have just expanded that, as mentioned in my response to Mark Ruskell. And the point, of course, that Mark Ruskell makes, and I agree with entirely, is that we are having to step in here because for asylum seekers, the origin, of course, of this question, asylum seekers are suffering so badly because of the inhumane laws of the UK government. And because of those inhumane laws, because of the fact that the UK government are inflicting destitution upon many of those asylum seekers, we are proud to step in, but we shouldn't have to step in. We shouldn't have to continually mitigate the worst excesses of the UK government. Far better we had these powers in our own hands, Presiding Officer.
Alec Crowley.
Presiding Officer, the origin of the question was how do we make bus travel more affordable? And the fact is that while we have a good comprehensive policy in place for those up to 22, those over 60, it's that bit in the middle that people are finding very difficult, and it is people on low pay and low income that are asking the question. So the point about the £2, when Andy Burnham introduced the £2 fares in Greater Manchester, the usage went up by 10% within a month. When are we going to look seriously at helping that group of people who are low paid, struggling most and finding bus travel unaffordable?
First Minister.
Of course, we can compare concessionary travel schemes right across the UK, and I go back to the point that we have the most comprehensive concessionary travel scheme here in the UK when it comes to helping
Let's hear the First Minister.
Those young people, when it comes to helping, of course, those with disabilities. Of course, older people are all being assisted through this concessionary travel scheme that we have, and that in turn, of course, is ensuring that there are millions of journeys every week being made, which, of course, in turn help those bus companies, particularly in the face of the challenges that they struggled with in the course of the pandemic. I should say to Alex Rowley, we do also have our Fair Fares review, and that is to ensure a sustainable and integrated approach is taken to public transport fares. And of course, I'm sure Alex Rowley and others will take great interest in that when it is published. But wherever we can act, whether it's on our buses or whether it's from removing peak fares on rail or in our ferries when it comes to the expansion of the concessionary scheme, we will act whenever we have the power to do so.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. For those living in the smaller isles in my constituencies, ferries to and from the Orkney mainland perform the very same role as bus transport elsewhere in the country. So can the First Minister confirm that young islanders relying on these lifeline routes will also be included in any future free ferry fare scheme?
First Minister.
Well, of course, consider that very important point that Liam MacArthur raises, and he raises an important and crucial point that these links are lifeline. They're important to young people on islands, just as, for example, rail services or bus services would be on the mainland. So we will give further details in due course, but that point will be one that is given serious consideration.
We move to general and constituency supplementaries. If we're concise, we'll be able to get more members in, and I call Claire Haughey.
I'm sure that members across this chamber will join me in welcoming the Emergency Access Naloxone scheme beginning this week. This will see access to potentially life-saving naloxone kits, which can reverse the effects of an opioid overdose, being expanded to community pharmacies right across Scotland. Can the First Minister say any more about how this will complement the Scottish Government's ongoing work to widen access to naloxone as part of the national mission to reduce drug deaths?
First Minister.
Well, I'm very pleased that access to naloxone is being expanded to community pharmacies right across Scotland through our national mission to reduce drugs deaths and indeed drugs harm. We've already invested more than £3 million in widening access to naloxone, including through our emergency services like Police Scotland and the Scottish Ambulance Service. However, we are now going further, and this new nationwide service, which launched on Monday, is a welcome addition to existing services. It's been backed by £300,000 of Scottish Government funding, and it will ensure that every community pharmacy will now hold at least 2 life-saving naloxone kits. I'm very grateful to all those in community pharmacies who are supporting our £250 million national mission to reduce drugs deaths.
Liz Smith.
Could I ask the First Minister when the chair of the El Jamil independent public inquiry will be in post?
First Minister.
Okay. That issue is one that, of course, we have to consult with the Lord President. I think Liz Smith will be aware of that. It will be for the Lord President to be able to nominate an appropriate senior judge for the inquiry. So those discussions are very much underway. I do understand the desire, completely understood desire for those who've suffered so badly at the hands of Professor El Jamil for pace and urgency. So there's no dither or delay at all from the government. Simply we have to go through the appropriate processes. I will ask the Cabinet Secretary for Health to write to Liz Smith with further details. But of course, I just reiterate that point that currently the issue around a judge, an appropriate judge being nominated is with the Lord President.
Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I draw members' attention to my register of interests? This afternoon, the City of Edinburgh Council is expected to declare a housing emergency following a call from Shelter Scotland. So will the Scottish Government now accept that there is a housing emergency in our capital city? And will the First Minister look at targeted solutions and investment to increase housing supply in Edinburgh?
First Minister.
Of course, we will watch those proceedings very closely from Edinburgh City Council. There is simply no getting away from the real challenge that Edinburgh City Council faces in relation to housing. And that's why this government has a very good track record of not just building houses, but of course socially affordable houses. From April 2007 to the end of June 2023, we have delivered over 123,000 affordable homes, over 87,000 of which are for social rent, including 22,994 council homes. We, of course, are the party that also ended the right to buy. That has protected an estimated 15,500 social homes. And, of course, Sarah Boyack will be very aware of the measures that this government has taken in order to control rent. So we will, of course, continue to liaise with Edinburgh City Council, as we would with other local authorities, in order to see what assistance we can provide in order to ensure that we deal with the real significant challenges they are facing in regards to housing.
Co-Cap Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the First Minister if he can provide an update on the Scottish Government's latest engagement with the UK Government regarding any plans for the medical evacuation of injured civilians from Gaza, in the light of his commitment to treat the injured civilians in Scottish hospitals in the event that there is a medical evacuation?
First Minister.
I make the point that I've made in this chamber before, that the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, they are very proud people. They should not have to leave their land. But of course, many of them have been forced to leave, particularly those from North Gaza to South Gaza. And of course, many are lying injured and dying in hospitals. Those hospitals vastly running out of fuel, indeed vastly running out of medical supplies. So where we can bring those injured people for treatment here in Scotland, in the UK, then Scotland is certainly prepared to do that. So officials are in regular contact with their counterparts in the UK Department of Health and Social Care. There's not been a request for the UK to receive medical evacuations from Gaza, but we hope that if that does come, then the UK and indeed Scotland will be ready to play its part. And I reiterate the calls that I've been making for many weeks now, that there must be an immediate ceasefire to allow a humanitarian corridor open, to allow supplies, including fuel, to come into Gaza, and of course for the bombing and the killing to stop. We have seen horrendous scenes over the course of just the last week alone, let alone the last 3.5 weeks, in particular the sickening bombing of Jabalia refugee camp, which must be condemned in the strongest possible manner.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Tuesday night in the Kirkton area of Dundee, large gangs caused chaos by damaging property, setting fires and blocking roads into a housing estate, prompting the intervention of riot police. This behaviour is unacceptable and Kirkton's residents deserve better. The police force is stretched due to funding constraints, making it increasingly challenging to handle large-scale incidents like this. So, First Minister, will you get behind the police and reverse police funding cuts?
First Minister.
Well, let's just first of all say very clearly that this was a very efficient response by Police Scotland. We should thank our police officers for all, what they do every single day, which is putting themselves in harm's way in order to protect the public. In terms of the funding for Police Scotland, I've said on many occasions in this chamber in recent weeks, of course, we provided this financial year an increase to Police Scotland in terms of their revenue budget. So I'm very grateful, not just to Police Scotland, but also to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and other partners for their swift attendance and their efficiency in dealing with what was damaging and reckless behaviour. And of course, there is an open investigation, police investigation underway, and I would urge anyone with information about that disorder to contact Police Scotland.
And Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Aberlour have called for a cancellation of school meal debt. They have also identified through their research that, and I quote, income thresholds for free school meal eligibility have barely risen in the last 20 years. Indeed, delays to free school meal extension mean that some parents and families are now feeling the impact of this government's inaction. Will the First Minister back calls for a cancellation of school meal debt, and will he consider an immediate uprating of income threshold to give working families some much-needed relief and further reduce the likelihood of hunger in schools?
First Minister.
What I would say to Carol Mockin is, of course, we will consider any suggestion, not just from trusted third sector partners like Aberlour, but indeed from right across the chamber as we head into the budget process. But we have, of course, a very generous free school meal offer that is available, and as per my programme for government, we will seek to expand that. But we know, of course, that we still have significant challenges around poverty here in Scotland. It is due, of course, to the Scottish Government's actions, including the game-changing Scottish Child Payment, that it's an estimated 90,000 children will be lifted out of poverty this year. But instead of having to mitigate continually the harm for Westminster, such as the two-child limit, such as the benefits cap, such as the rape clause, all of these issues, some of which we can mitigate, some of which I'm afraid we simply can't. Wouldn't it be much better to have the full powers in our own hands so we couldn't just reduce poverty but eradicate it altogether?
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. Point of order, Douglas Ross.
I'm grateful, Presiding Officer. In his answers this afternoon, the First Minister said of the request for messages from the Scottish Government, and I quote, "The messages themselves were asked for in September, just a matter of weeks ago." However, commenting on this at the UK COVID inquiry, Jamie Dawson KC said, "Requests have sought not only information, but also access to potentially relevant messages. Requests for such information and such messages were issued in late 2022.
So is the First Minister able to confirm that the counsel to the inquiry is correct? And if so, will he revise the statement he made to Parliament?
The point Mr Ross raises is not a point of order. Obviously, Mr Ross's comments are now on the record, and there may be a response or otherwise. It's certainly the content of members' contributions are a matter for the member themselves. At this point, we will move on. Well, we will ask the gallery and the chamber will be cleared, and there will be a short suspension before we move on to members' business.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We're committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.